Welcome back to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to business continuity, resilience, COVID, crisis management, emergency management, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me at alexfullick.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only one there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Today is part 2 of my talk with Mark Armour. And if you listen to the other, or part 1, the other episode, I said I had a question for him, and I was just going to let him loose on this one, but I'm sure I'll jump in. And Mark, first of all, welcome back for part 2.
Thank you, Alex. Good to be here.
And you already know the question I'm going to ask you, but so it's going to be a good one and a big one, and I'm really interested to hear the opinion.
Sure.
Knowing that with your partner in crime, Dr. David Lindstedt, you are part of the Adaptive Business Continuity, you're the founders. I'm wondering how resilience and adaptive business continuity work together.
Excellent question. So I'm gonna preface this by saying, if you were to ask my colleague, Dr. David Lindstedt, maybe other people in the adaptive world, the same question, they're probably gonna answer it differently than I do. And I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think we necessarily all have to agree or be in lockstep with one another. And let's face it, business continuity is so evolving. Resilience is really kind of yet to be properly defined, if it ever even will. We'll see what happens. So I think it's fair for all of us to have different opinions about how these things kind of interplay, and let's see how things go in the future, and what works and what doesn't. So the question is, so adaptive business continuity and resilience. So I believe adaptive business continuity is almost kind of the tactical level of resilience, and I there's a lot of avenues we could go down, and let me explore 2. I think the value of adaptive business continuity and how it relates to resilience is really kind of around mindset and approach. And when I talk about mindset, adaptive business continuity, if you remember, or if anybody knows about adaptive, if not, you can learn more, certainly, but it's based on principles. It's not a methodology. There's no actions to execute. There's no life cycle. You aren't expected to produce specific deliverables. It really is based on principles, right? Things like learn the business and prepare for effects and not causes. Get incremental direction from leadership. If we apply the principles in the way we work, then the method becomes almost superfluous or unnecessary, right? If we're focused really on delivering value for the organization, that becomes our primary driver. And in my mind, right, that's the approach we should take to business continuity, and how we prepare organizations for how are they going to handle disruptions, and even how we define very specific strategies for how we're going to deal with specific losses. But if we take that same mindset, we can apply it just as equally to resilience, right? I don't believe there's any single series of steps we can take that contribute to improved resilience in an organization. But I do believe we could apply a set of principles. Are they the exact same principles as we apply to adaptive business continuity? Probably not. Are there some that apply? Yes. Are there some that don't apply? Probably. And there's probably going to be some principles that apply to resilience that perhaps don't apply to that tactical level of business continuity. So that's the first avenue. And then the other avenue, and these are kind of related, is the idea that there isn't a methodology that we have to follow. Means we're really kind of open to whatever steps we need to take to contribute to improved resilience, or in the case of adaptive business continuity, really improved preparedness and improved preparedness for business continuity capabilities. And the example we can explore, right, is we so often think of business continuity as being plans and a set of procedures that we're going to execute. And in adaptive, we've switched that and said, plans matter less, or in Mark Armour's view, they don't matter at all. What really matters are capabilities. A capability could be a resource, and that resource could be tied to a specific strategy. It could be like an alternate workspace that we have to utilize. It could be pre-deployed resources that we could distribute somewhere if we have, say, an equipment or some kind of physical device lost, right? Laptops or servers or cell phones, whatever. Or if you're in the manufacturing industry, it might be a mold injector. Or it could just as well be the capability to make decisions, or even what I would call the authority, right, to leverage or utilize those resources, right? So it's the authority for somebody at a local level to say, yep, we're going to go utilize that alternate workspace, or I'm going to go ahead and spend the money to ship those resources that we need, maybe ahead of some kind of situation that we anticipate or in response to some kind of outage. Now, think of it this way. How we obtain those resources and the approach we might take might be dictated by a very specific approach, right? There's going to be hard dollars involved. We're going to have to go get approval and authority to procure those resources. There's probably going to be some logistics involved. Where are we going to store them or house them? How are we going to deploy them when they are most needed? We're going to take a specific approach. And the thing is, if we talk about the empowerment or the authority piece, completely different set of activities we're going to have to follow. We're going to have to find out, well, who's going to have to utilize these resources? Do they have the authority and the ability to be able to sign those checks or authorize the deployment of those resources? That's something different entirely. We don't need a budget for that. What we might need is some kind of approval at a higher level. Yes, let's give that person that kind of emergency authority. We can go even a step further and say, well, do they feel empowered? Are they trusted to make that decision? And let's make sure that there's a very clear understanding that, yes, in these kinds of situations, if you're cut off from the decision maker or you're under duress to do something within a very specific time frame, yes, we trust you to make the right decision for your staff, for the organization, and for the community that you operate in. So in my view, there isn't a methodology or a series of steps that's going to apply in both those situations, right? Procuring resources, granting authority, and developing trust and empowerment. Completely different steps that we're going to follow. So to me, adaptive fosters that idea and that concept that in every situation, we might have to take a very different approach. And if we're not driven by a methodology, but instead driven by the principles, and we have an awareness and understanding that the approach we take is going to be dictated by the action that we want to take, then we put ourselves in a better position.
Circling back to our talk just a little while ago, excuse me, does the adaptive approach then, if it's a mindset and as it relates to resilience, does that also relate then to creating the culture, or does the culture drive that? Because you gave some examples of empowering people, but then that comes to your organizational culture. So how does that fit together?
It's a good question. That's the old chicken and egg conundrum, isn't it? Right. I think the answer is both. I think to a degree, the trust that exists across leadership and different leadership hierarchies in an organization is going to drive the level of trust that exists. But I do believe we could influence that culture and that trust, right? If we open people, if you're an organization, for instance, that does have limited trust, we don't want people, in that retail store to be able to procure those resources or take that action. Well, if we understand that there's a risk involved there, if they are cut off from communications, if something unforeseen does happen and they need to respond very quickly and to be effective, to protect employees and to protect the business, then it's contingent upon leadership to grant that authority and to develop that level of trust. My belief is, well, that's going to contribute to perhaps improving the culture. Once the folks that need to start making those decisions understand the benefits of granting that authority and developing that trust, well, certainly that might have some kind of downstream effects in terms of their colleagues and other people within the organization who see, oh, I have that level of authority. Oh, look, we're having a conversation where I'm being told that I'm trusted to make those decisions. That's essentially going to create a more empowered employee and probably store manager who's probably going to push that culture down to the people within their environment, within the store that they manage or the teams that they're responsible for.
And then from there, hopefully you get resilience.
Exactly. Right. So I guess we've come full circle now, right? We approach business continuity at a very tactical level, and we talk about the very specific steps that we can take in order to improve our level of preparedness and to improve and develop those capabilities that we need in order to be better responsive and better able to deal with those consequences. The result of that, right? It fosters greater collaboration. We build better relationships. And again, it influences it probably in a positive way, the overall culture of the organization. And these are all things that contribute to the organization's overall resilience, because resilience isn't just, well, how do we deal with a hurricane or some kind of major outage or disruption? It could be a change in our industry. It could be some up and coming unforeseen competitor that we now have to deal with. And if we create a culture, right, that's responsive, where individuals within the organization feel trusted and empowered, they're the ones on the front lines who might see some of these changes coming. They see that competitor that's working in the same community, and they might start taking action. And even if they feel trusted and empowered, escalating awareness to the people, to the leaders within the organization, both for awareness purposes and maybe even for them to take action.
I should have asked you this in the other episode. How can organizations start making that change? Getting away from all the deliverable approach to the mindset. I can't imagine any executive is going to turn around and say, okay, don't do this anymore, don't do that anymore. So
Nope.
what couple of things could maybe some of our listeners consider doing to change that mindset and create some of the things that you just talked about?
That's a good question. I think it starts with modeling the behavior, right? So if we embody, right, and represent the culture that we want to see and the approach that we want to see the people in our organization take, people are going to see that, right? And by modeling it, particularly for the people that report to us or even to our peers and colleagues, we can have an influence in that behavior. Another piece, as you said, this isn't going to happen overnight, right? We can't walk into the CEO's office and say, we need to change our culture here. Here's what I think we need to do. And the light will go on over their head and we'll be like, Mark, of course you're right. We're going to start that tomorrow morning. That's unrealistic. We do need to acknowledge that these kinds of changes take time and they take effort. So we have to be patient and we have to be persistent. So, like I said, modeling the behavior, but the extent to which we can promote that behavior by pointing out when we see behavior that goes against the culture that we want to see within the organization, as well as acknowledging and applauding when we see positive behavior that models the culture that we want to see within the organization. That's how we can have a positive influence in that direction. And then the third piece, and I think I talked about this in the first session, it's about relationships. I think and this isn't unique to business continuity. I think too often we think, well, if we have like a solid business case, if we can speak logically about the reasons why we need to build business continuity or business continuity capability, people will listen to us. And any salesperson worth their weight will tell you, no, it's about relationships. So if you start by developing positive relationships, then having a logical case and being able to support that and justify why you're doing the things that you do help But those things are not going to provide benefit if you don't have a positive relationship. If you go into somebody's office and you have a positive relationship and they enjoy working with you and they believe and trust in what you do and what you say, you're putting yourself in a much better position to be able not only to make the case, but for the person on the receiving end to be receptive to the case that you're making. And I think that's where we fall short too often. I think we might have some really good ideas for why things need to be done or why decisions need to be made, but we're approaching an audience that maybe they're meeting us for the first time, or maybe they're not even receptive because the last time they saw us, it was to ask for funds for some kind of activity that they didn't see the benefit of, or they were being told that they need to devote resources to some kind of activity that they didn't see any value from. BIA. So if we can limit these things that generate that negative perception and instead focus just on developing positive relationships and developing people who are receptive to what we have to say and have trust in what we have to say, then we can go with those great ideas and we have a much, much better chance of being successful, which I know that was long-winded. I'll await your response.
Good answer.
Okay,
you mentioned something that really I think people overlook, and that was be patient and time.
Yes.
That things won't happen quickly. I can't imagine changing your behavior, is going to happen quickly.
Yep.
That's not, and then having that trickle down, if that's if you're a CIO or a president, having that trickle down to your reports, who then have to change their behavior, and then that trickles down again. Yep. That cannot be quick. And then to get to the point of not destination or anything like that, but to be able to even say that we have some semblance of resilience here, that time is something I think a lot of people overlook.
Indeed. And I've seen it at work myself, right? So often we go into these organizations or we're trying to build programs, it feels insurmountable. But if we stop looking at that goal that's maybe a year or 18 months out, instead focus on what I'm going to do tomorrow, what I'm going to do by the end of this week. So often, and you might have found this is the case, you get a year out and you turn around and you look back and you say, geez, look at what we've accomplished. Look at what things looked like when I first walked in the door. And if we can have that mindset that we can't be overwhelmed by the work in front of us and focus instead just on the work that we need to get done today and tomorrow. And again, that persistence and modeling that behavior, then we put ourselves in a better position for sure.
Is it maybe because some people think I just don't have the time, so they see time more as a hindrance or something that can't be achieved because they don't have enough of it? But then, as you just said, you can look back a year later and find out, wow, look how much we did get done.
Yeah. I think it's two things. I think to a degree maybe it is patience, right? And I think people do become overwhelmed because when we talk about business continuity, we talk about resilience. These are huge activities, and we know they touch on all parts of the organization. They require working with all different people and in all different levels of the organization. It can be overwhelming. If we parse it up into chunks, it becomes somewhat manageable. I think what happens, and I'm theorizing here, right? I don't know this for a certainty, but from what I've seen in the conversations I've had, I think too often because we're focused on that far off objective, we don't want to get it wrong, right? We don't want to go down the wrong path and then find ourselves 6 months down the road. Shoot, we didn't define this right. We did stuff wrong. The result of that is I think we wind up with that analysis paralysis issue, or people wanting things to become perfect before they make that first step. And that sometimes it results in us taking a long time to get stuff going because we want perfect data. We want a perfect plan. We want a well-defined roadmap that clearly sends us on the path to the objective that we want. And I would say, you have to get out of that mindset because we all work in dynamic, ever-changing, evolving organizations. That great roadmap, it may be perfect, right? It might actually get you to the objective that you want, but I guarantee you in 6 months' time, that objective is no longer applicable because now your organization's introduced some new product or service. There is that new competitor that's forced them now to adopt a different business model. So that objective provides you very little benefit, and you now have to redo your roadmap. So I would suggest to people, don't wait for perfection. Be willing to take risks and experiment. Move forward in small chunks, see what works. And if you tackle it that way, if you make a mistake, well, you're only a week or so into the process, you can quickly pivot and go in the right direction. And if you're willing to adjust and don't put yourself in the position of, this is the roadmap I've developed, I'm going to continue down that path, then you put yourself in the position of being able to pivot, of being able to change when your organization evolves or changes itself.
Well, it's like that old Chinese, I believe it's a Chinese proverb, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
Exactly. Yep.
So, and who knows over that year, if you're trying to go for a straight line, well, you gave a whole bunch of examples, but there could have been people leaving, coming and going, could have had a couple of operational incidents, and your straight line starts to go like this.
Exactly. Yep.
Mark, we've come to the end of this session. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to convey?
I think I've covered it all. Boy, the time goes fast, doesn't it, when we talk about
it? It does. Well, on that, thanks again, Mark. I really appreciate you coming and joining us today and talking about adaptive and resilience.
It was fun.
I really appreciate it. It was great chatting with you again, and I'm glad you were able to make it today too.
Thank you, Alex. It was a pleasure.
And for everybody watching, don't forget to check out part 1. And just in case you're seeing this one first, I'll link it at the end of this video. And otherwise, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.